Hey everyone, welcome back to Rogue 16. We are doing another spotlight tonight, and we're doing Donovan's Demise, which is an Indiana Jones piece. We've got Tom on. Tom, thank you for hanging out with us and for
How's it going?
jumping on
Thanks
again.
for having me again.
Yeah,
Always
we
good to chat, guys.
always appreciate it. This is an interesting piece. So this is Tom. This is the first I'm not going to say Regal Robot piece. This is the first in Star Wars type of piece that
It's
you've done in the past that feels like big for
it's
Indiana
funny.
Jones.
I mean, it is a very us piece,
It
right?
is. It is.
It definitely like ticks off a lot of the boxes, and I think for us, I to me, it's one of these things that like I we love doing things that are unexpected, right?
Mhm, mhm,
I think this qualifies. Like I remember like we announced we were working on a new prop for the indie series that was going to come out, a replica
mhm.
1-to-1. We didn't say too much about it other than like trust me, it's not what you think.
Yeah.
like
Right.
um but it's another one of these pieces where it's like we go to the archives, we get to be hands-on with all this stuff and rummage through and see all these, you know, gems in amongst all the props that were used in the films and things like that, and seeing the animatronics that they used to create that effect of him aging rapidly or raging apidly apparently um really caught my eye. I'm a creature guy. Like I grew up wanting to do special makeup effects and things like
Mhm.
that. And when I was 14, I was in my basement making foam latex appliances of like, look, it's a vampire and half his skin is pulled off,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
making werewolves and Texas Chainsaw Massacre masks and things like that. Um, so this opportunity to bring in like a little of that horror element and to do something
So
we
good.
had never seen anyone do. Like
Yeah,
this
no.
has
Yeah.
never been done licensed.
No, and
Don't
I
think
love
I've ever seen it done fan made.
no,
And
and
certainly no one's done it by like getting the original prop and 3D scanning it and
no.
everything that we do. So yeah,
And I
really
love that Indiana Jones collectors are getting that same level of collectible that it feels like you're stepping into a big type of collectible like we've gotten with the Salacious Crumb, like we've gotten
yeah,
with
the
the
Tuscan
Rancor,
Raider, the
the Tusken
Chewbacca
Raider.
Yeah,
bust.
Yes,
it
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
has it's definitely in that territory.
it
Yeah.
yeah.
feels like that to me.
It's I mean, it's a very us piece, right? I mean, yeah, life-sized. So the head on this is and the teeth and everything are scanned right off of the original stage 2 animatronic. Um,
It's crazy.
it's got hand applied hair. The chest section is sculpted to look like the costume he wore in the movie. It's got all the textures on it, so it really almost looks like fabric when you're up
Mhm.
close.
I
It's
was gonna ask that. I'm glad you mentioned that because I couldn't
Yeah,
tell from even the lighting. It's kind of tough. It teases the eye because it looks so realistic.
thank you.
Is that
Yeah,
sculpted? Is that cloth? And
Christian really pushed the boundaries on like making realistic fabric at
mm,
full scale this way. And it works for this because in that scene, by the time it gets to stage 2, his jacket is basically charred black with some brown and tan on it.
right.
So that's what we've got here. And it's tough to tell in the picture. The brown and the tan are there, but it just kind of reads black. But the other thing that we did, and this was something that as soon as we started doing, I'm like, I know what we've got to do here. If you go back to the last picture, you might even be able to
Yeah.
zoom in on it. There was like that 3 up. If you zoom in on the jacket there
Let me see if I
on the bottom
can.
left, um,
It's not letting me.
you could just zoom out and make it smaller.
Yeah, I'll
Um,
make it smaller. It's
yeah,
fine.
perfect. Folks can go to the regalrobot.com page, go to the blog, and they
Yeah.
can find this in the news
Yeah, yeah.
section. But if you zoom in on that, there is actual like sand on top of the paint in a
Mm,
bunch of patches that looks like the dust that was settling on him as he was
nice.
aging in the film. And it really just sells this
that's
idea that
cool.
this is charred up,
Oh,
Yeah,
so this is
I can see
deteriorating
the
stuff.
different texture on
Yes.
it, on top of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
That's
that's
cool.
actual sand added later, this
Mhm.
black and brown charred up looking sand that we mix into glue and add on
That's
after the fact
yeah,
to
that's really
give it
cool.
that one extra dimension and really give it this feeling like, something just happened here.
So those are those extra elements, kind of like we saw with the Wampa, where the picture doesn't necessarily do it justice. And then you see all those sort of nuanced detail when you have it in hand, right?
To me, it's a little like when you ride the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland, right? Like you can ride that 10 times, you can ride it 100 times. You're
And there's
always
always
going to
something to
find
notice.
something new to notice. If I'm going to put something on somebody's shelf, they have to be able to look at this for more than a split second.
Sure.
They have to be able to, stare at it, digest it, go further, look and go like, oh, what are those little raisins inside his eye sacs? Oh gosh, those are his eyes that got shriveled up in the scene. And you don't even think about it, but they're in there, or that he's got a broken and missing tooth, or that there's a bit of tongue inside of there, or that his gums are actually receded from his teeth and that's on the original animatronic. So it's not just like that his mouth is open, he's got these rotting teeth, but like there's actually exposed bone over each tooth where the gums are pulled back. The hair, there's some weft hair going on in the back, some line work, but then the last 3 or 4 inches of it is all put on by hand, a few hairs at a time. So it looks like, real feathered, just a really far back hairline there. Here's a neat thing though. So this is technically the stage 2 animatronic. The stage 1, it starts off looking pretty similar to Donovan, just older.
Mm-hmm.
And then his eyelids droop in that one. His nose shrivels a little bit. His mouth moves and stuff. I think his cheek sucked in. A few other little things. At some point in that, his eyes roll up and his head leans back. And then when he leans back down, when he was back, they do a transition. They transition to the stage 2 head, which is this one. His head comes down and immediately his nose shrivels into this skull-like nose. His gums recede, his mouth opens more, his eyes shrivel up into the sockets. So we're basing this on the animatronic for that second phase, which is still in the archives and in this basic configuration with the raisin eyes, we were calling them. But the interesting thing is they did a visual effect to keep the hair from the phase 1 bust, because I guess the transition, because they didn't have digital to transition these things. I guess the transition would have looked weird if the hair just disappeared, because the bust for the phase 2 in the archives has almost no hair. Both of them don't have a lot of hair. My guess is they probably had some expensive hair pieces on them that they pulled off to reuse. Because these things can be hundreds and hundreds of dollars in a film scenario. But for what we did, we wanted to make sure if people held this up and looked on screen that they saw the right thing. So we gave it the stage 1 hair that is what is maintained on screen.
On screen, yeah, that's cool.
And that's why he's got that full mane. The other thing that's really cool is there's a private collector that we do a ton of work for on the restoration and display side with my other company. He actually has the bust from where the hair grew rapidly. So there's a scene where you see Donovan from the back and Allison screaming and the hair just grows.
Yeah.
So they shot that in reverse, and it's long hair going through tons of holes in the back of this fiberglass.
And they're like pulling it through,
and the front of it is just wide open. There's no face at all, and it's just a ponytail that someone pulled on.
Just leaning through. That's
back.
It's
and,
amazing.
They just played it in reverse, and so that thing exists. And the collector had gotten his original jacket and shirt, I think, from the movie, and put it on that bust, because it's like a torso, and it's a killer display.
So cool.
But it's like you want to display it backwards,
That's crazy.
The great thing about this too is it's not recreated from a digital asset. This was a practical effect, a physical effect.
Yeah.
So getting that recreated is fantastic.
Tom, do you know
go through those steps?
It's old school ILM wizardry.
That's what makes it so
animatronics,
cool.
It's puppets. It's foam and fiberglass and acrylic and hair and latex and little what do you call them, cable mechs and bladders for the eyes to suck in and all of that stuff.
I always say that's what gets you to sometimes, for some collectors, where it's the aesthetic value first, and then when they get to learn that, right, and go down that rabbit hole, whether it's via a book or a behind the scenes on a DVD, and it kind of puts you down that rabbit hole.
1-6 podcast.
This
is what it's all about.
you get to learn more, and then you appreciate it differently. It has sort of a
Well,
different meaning because it's got its own, the practical elements of it.
Tom, what did they do you know did they make this did they do this mask based off of his fate? Like did they actually like get his
I mean, it looks to me, so there are, if I'm not mistaken, there's a couple of the molds are actually still at the archives, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken. Um, but and some other elements, maybe a face cast. My guess is they probably took a face cast of him, did a
Yeah.
clay press of it, and then sculpted it a few different ways. Because the third phase is stop motion,
Oh,
which is
right.
where it starts to really deteriorate and turn into little like bits and balls and stuff like that. Um, but my if you know the way this would traditionally be done is you would take a casting of the actor's face, you would press warm clay into it, and then when you would pull that casting off, you would have an oil based clay casting of the actor's head,
Right.
and in that you could then sculpt him, more deteriorated or less. It's possible with these that they could have done them, freehand, that someone
Freehand,
just
right.
worked off of photos or a life cast as reference and just did it that way. But usually just for the expedience, they would normally kind of you start with a clay press or a casting.
It
Um,
looks so good. Tom,
thanks.
did you guys yeah, I mean I know you got Julian Glover's signature on there,
Yes.
which is really cool. Um were you there when he signed it or did you send stuff in or
Yeah,
what?
I wanted to ask the same. What was his
Yeah.
reaction to seeing this all these years later?
Yeah,
He must
yeah.
have been like,
Yeah, it's funny. I his there's a little. He sent us a little surprise video when he did the signing. We're gonna post it up in our Facebook group
Cool.
on Friday. So keep eyes there if anybody wants to go to the Regal Robot Fan and Collector Showcase on Facebook. Um, and it's he doesn't mention the bust itself. He mentions the plaques and he thinks they look
Mm.
real smart. um, but really nice, gentlemanly, kind of response. He did the signing in England, so unfortunately we couldn't be
Yeah,
there
sure.
for it.
Sure.
I would have loved to have been. I did get to meet him at Star Wars Celebration 2.
wow.
So I'm really, really grateful I had that chance when I did. I did have him sign a picture of it was both I had made a photo, an 8x10 that was General Veers in one area and
Mm,
Donovan holding the false grail, I think, on the other, and he signed
that's
that
cool.
to me. So that was very nice. A lot of those guys back in the day in those early celebrations, you got to spend a good amount of time with them. It was
Yeah.
only like $20 for an autograph or $15 or something.
Man, times
Um,
have changed.
Yeah,
yeah,
it
you'd
wasn't a
get a
line of
photo
battle. You
with
get
them
to
and
speak to
everything
him.
while you were there. It was a very different time. Yeah. But so I had that in the past where I'd met him. I was okay, doing this one remotely. Yeah, there he is doing the
Yep.
signing at his table there. Um, so he definitely looks better than the bus does.
Yeah,
Um,
it does. It does.
we
It
did.
does.
It's funny, this was kind of a random screen cap, but it really matched up pretty well
I was
with
gonna
this one
say
photo.
Yeah.
it's uncanny how
um,
well the bus
Crazy.
matches the screen grab.
we
Yeah.
tried to give the bus because it's a mechanical thing, right?
Mhm.
So in the movie, the big moves to me are he has the head lean back is a big part of this
Mhm.
this thing that's happening. He does a lot of that. The mouth being open for this stage, I think, is really key. It shows the lips pulling back. It exposes that gum thing I was talking about. Um, having the teeth open the right amount to give him like a not quite. You don't want him to look like he's like
Right,
you
right.
just want to imply motion, and that was
Even
the
the
other thing.
jaw
So
looks kind of
Does the
cocked.
jaw move back and
exactly,
forth? Does it move
yeah,
back and forth on the animatronic
it
or?
definitely,
Okay.
yeah. There's like a
Yeah,
chaw,
yeah,
or whatever you want to call that. And so for this, yeah, we have the jaw off to
yeah,
one side slightly, the mouth open, the
yeah,
head leaning back in the opposite way. All of this, like, it's like when you're doing a contrapposto sort of figural sculpt,
yeah.
right? It's like, how do you imply motion on a
Right,
static thing?
On a
right.
And
static piece,
that
yeah.
was what I felt like this needed. And that was really what we pushed for. Christian, who's our lead digital guy at the studio, he did all the cleanup on the scan and then, sculpted out the chest area and stuff. and he did all the reposing with me, and we just went through and we're like, nah, a little more here, a little more there. We printed a small one to look at it. You know, it's okay, a little more tilt, you know, that kind of thing.
I think it stands out great. So talking about that, how do you get a static prop to look like it's sort of in motion? And the one thing I noticed almost immediately when the first teaser images went up was the jaw specifically.
Yeah.
And it looks like he has that kind of, you know,
like
a reactive, a very reactive impression. And it's just, it's wild. Not something
the asymmetry in the lips helps, you know, it really, I'm really, really proud of the pose on this. I feel like that really helps sell it.
It's really good.
Now, this is a little outside of the product details, but I got to ask, the conversation had to have come up where you looked at each other like, they're going to love it, but it's going to be a hard one to display. What do you guys think? Should we, just because we could, it doesn't mean we should. Like,
yeah. I mean, we've never let that stop us.
It's true. It's true.
I mean, look, we joke about, you know, oh, I won this in a, you know, raffle.
Well,
How many wives are going to be like, there's no way you're putting that on display? Not even in your collection.
But with Star Wars, like, I feel like it's the same type of thing as, like, I mean, Salacious is a little bit of a, you know, crazy looking guy, but CZ3 is, he's great. He's like crazy looking. So,
it's
like,
kind of nightmare fuel. Yeah,
it is. But
well, you know, it's funny to me.
That doesn't look like somebody's Uncle Frank.
That's true. Like, doesn't look like somebody's dying in front of you.
Right? Yeah. No, not Uncle Frank. Too soon, Jason. The thing that gets so I'm a bust and mask collector in general.
Mm-hmm.
I love heads. I love putting a bunch of heads on shelves. I love one-to-one. I love things that feel like an element that was used in the movie.
Yeah.
And you know, this to me feels that way. It has that like you grabbed a moment out of the film thing going on, but it still feels faithful to the proppiness of it.
Yeah.
It's not sanitized. It's not cleaned up. And you know, I feel like Indiana Jones collections are, you know, there's a great, one of the strengths about a good indie collection is variety.
Sure.
You go through these guys who have collections where they've got, you know, there are people who have picked out every artifact that's on Indy's desk in his classroom when Brody walks in.
Archaeological things.
Yeah. There is an archaeological nature to the collecting in this, that you want to go through the films and pick out all this little stuff in the background that you could replicate or have or find, or, you know, find maybe a similar version of something that really exists in the real world and bring it in as an artifact. You know, I think it's a really good question. Will they extend that variety to a one-to-one bust of a really iconic scene?
But this is why I was saying that before, Jason. Like, it's fascinating to me because, like, Star Wars, we've got the Cantina, you know, monsters
all
and all
palace aliens, skiff guards,
all these things that we're used to seeing. Well, you can make a ton of that stuff, right? Ewoks, all that stuff. Droids, so like we've got a ton of that stuff, but Indiana Jones, like, that's not that's it. That's like a real world kind of adventure type of thing. So, like, this is great though, man. This is like a fantastic piece that I think people are gonna really love. I mean, it's so different.
Far the reaction has been really good.
Yeah.
I think the price for what we're given and what we're putting into it is, I think, really good.
I think the price is amazing on this.
What is the price? Can we say the price?
I was expecting double on this.
Yeah. So the price is $12.99.
Yeah, it's great.
So, you know, and a lot of our Star Wars busts are, you know, upwards of $3,000 at this point.
Right.
We made this in a way that is repeatable. You know, it was the sort of thing where we just put a ton of work into figuring out, you know, how do we make it? It's still, this one's 100% made in the New York shop, you know, other than the signature that came from England. You know, so it was just about, how do we do this in an efficient manner and still give the right look and all of that stuff. And, you know, I'm really, really proud that we pulled that part of this off. And, you know, I think you're talking an edition of only 89 pieces. That's, you know, way less than our Urn of Nurhaci, which is currently, you know, a big sought after item. But because of the signature, we had to put a limit on it. And for me, I thought, well, you know, one, we always like, if we're going to do a low limit, let's match it to the year of the movie. 89 makes sense. But
Yeah, that's
two,
cool.
this is a higher price piece than some of the other stuff. So, okay, maybe that brings the demand down. And three, it's an unusual piece.
Yeah.
Maybe that brings the demand down a little bit.
What
So we
was your
balance that with a tighter edition size, and maybe that brings demand up a little
Tom,
bit.
what was your Bellux staff priced at?
That was $15.99.
Okay.
So yeah,
But it was big and it had all the plating.
it's big. The plating was yeah, and there's a lot of with pieces like that. There are things people don't consider in terms of the types of molds for a piece like that versus a piece like this. The way they're cast versus a piece like this. The fact that that kind of plating, not every piece is a success. So there's
Right.
runoff when you're doing something plated that you don't necessarily have when it's something that's a creature that you paint by hand, etc. So
Is
for this to come in less than that, though, to me
It's
is
amazing.
really something.
It's amazing. Question: are you keeping all you? I think I know the answer, but you're keeping all of the Indiana Jones stuff on wood, like the
That's
wood
the goal.
style?
Yeah, and, wherever it makes sense.
Yeah.
The archangels, the cherubim don't have a base because they come with a gold base. It's
Sure.
like it's already there.
Yeah.
So one less expense to add to it.
It makes sense. The wood looks great with Indiana
But yeah,
Jones.
it kind of pulls the line together, and it's with him, it's the same exact stain that we have, and that's the thing. We have one source for these wood bases, and they're using the same stain for all our indie stuff, and the same same wood grain and black satin for all of our our Star Wars stuff. So gives each line a little identity, and it looks right. Like he would look okay on black, but the wood, to me, there's something about it that really works for this.
It's great.
Even with the tone and the color from the bust up, like the jacket and the clothing.
It
if
sets
it
it
was
off.
black, I feel like it wouldn't have.
It would almost blend into the piece more.
Yeah.
The fact that it's wood actually gives it like grounds it, and it gives it a lift and makes it like it's like a presentation.
Without visually competing with it, it gives it a nice touch together. What I don't know if we covered. What are the dimensions on this roughly?
Let's see here. About 11 or 11 and a half inch from shoulder to shoulder. He's about 15 and a half or 16 inches tall.
So this is a decent sized piece. Okay.
Yeah, it's life sized. And maybe it's about 10 and a half inches deep, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. And that's mostly like jaw to the back of the head because of the angle there.
Dude, what a great piece, man.
Yeah, this is.
It really is.
Thanks, dude.
It's just, it really is. It's a fantastic addition, I think, for people that don't have anything like this. I mean,
that's exactly it. It's look, what do we try and do? Like everything we do, we're trying to make it uniquely us, uniquely a Regal Robot thing. This is that for indie, right? Like
it really is.
There's if you have some big corporate licensee came up and said, oh, we have this new Indiana Jones piece that's going to be in the parks or something like that. This is not in the top 50 guesses that someone does.
No. And that's look, to be a fly on the wall during some of these meetings, right? Yeah. So like we talked about this when we did the EFOP Moment Cat chat the other night. I said, the best part that you're getting from this, and this is genuine, right? Is that you got people making it who just love it so much, right? Yeah. It's kind of like what we were talking about before going live, where you don't just go 40% of the way, 50% of the way, unless you can get it as exact as possible, and materials, details, etc. You want it to be as an exact match,
and no one's going to do that unless they love it.
Exactly. So unless you have that same passion and love, so even when you get the hand painted elements and details, and and then you also have that creative aspect of somebody like the creative mindset of like, is it done yet? I could have done this. I could have had a little more. But with all that being said, there's going to be those times at the meetings where it's like, what are they going to bring us next? Or like, you come out with this, like, they're like, guys, what do you think? And they're like, wait, April Fool's, right? Like, no, this is what we want to do. It's like, but if you weren't so in love with it and so curiously intrigued by it and taken aback by it, you wouldn't have that. Like, we wouldn't see pieces like this if it wasn't for that. Like you said, being younger and just making all these cool masks and doing all these details. And even when you watch the guys talk about like, they're all going back to, when I first saw Harry House, when I first saw Harry, and it triggered that part in their mind. And it's like, getting that from such a point of love and passion, but from an executive perspective, right? That corporate perspective, they must be like, guys, what's next? Like, what are you coming to us with this next for, right? I mean, it's got to be some interesting stuff.
It definitely it generates some very interesting conversations on that side of thing. You know, it's funny. There is though, I've gotten to see a lot of people walk through the archives over the years, you know, for the first time, and it's always fascinating to be what grabs people's eyes, because it's very easy to walk and go, you know, ooh, lightsaber, ooh, blaster, you know, that kind of thing, and just go to the sort of, you know, for lack of a better word, like the obvious stuff,
Right.
the you know, high profile type stuff, if
Yeah.
you will. But it seems like a lot of the folks that I go with wind up stopping at things they never expected to stop at.
Where it's like, hey, I remember. It's not the high profile, but it's like, I remember this. And then they get so,
Or like, wait, where did they use that? You know?
Yeah.
And like figuring out stuff, which, I mean, you know, knock on, like, for us, some of the cool thing is even helping the archives figure out what some of this stuff is.
Well,
you know,
that's what I was gonna say. There's gonna be pieces there too where it's like, oh, I didn't even know this was a practical effect, or that this is still,
yeah. Oh, you know what? One of
my
favorite things like that
of this, so 5 variations of it to be made. That scene,
yeah. Or there is one shot in Return of the Jedi where Boba Fett is flying across the background with his jetpack after he's been Boba Fett where, you know? It's the 12-inch Kenner action figure repainted, used as the insert in the background for that shot. I think it's that shot. It's one of that sequence. And that action figure is still there. And it's like, why do they have this? Well,
that's crazy.
Different. What is going on there? It's got string on it. What do we think that is? And it's like, there it is. I mean, and they knew what that one was. But one of my favorites like that, there's a movie called Top Secret with Val Kilmer, and Peter Cushing is in it. And it's a really dopey movie from the guys that made the Airplane movies. But in the movie, there's a gag where there's like a guy who's got like he's a horse and carriage, and it's like this little white pony is pulling the carriage, and the pony is singing. He's like, you know, he's singing like Beatles songs or something. And they cut to a close-up of the pony, and he's going like la la, and he's singing, and his lips are going. And for my entire life, I'm like, oh, they did the peanut butter trick like they did for Mr. Ed, and that's how they made this pony thing. And in 2004, Stuart Freeborn had retired, and he was moving from his, you know, the sort of like estate house that he had, where he had these 5 workshops that were in old greenhouses. That, you know, that was where he had done all his effects over the years. And he's moving into a small house, so he had the guys from Prop Store helping him find homes for stuff. One of the things that was there was a white horse head that he had made that was a puppet horse head. And I'm like, that was a puppet? Like, this whole time I was just sure. Oh, by the way, the joke is the horse starts coughing, and, you know, the people getting off the carriage goes like, is he going to be okay? And he's like, he's just a little horse. Terrible joke. But the little horse was a puppet, and I had no idea, and I never would have known if we had not been going through Stuart Freeborn's stuff and found a horse head and had to figure out, like,
that's
wait,
crazy.
what is that?
That's Tom, wild. That's wild.
Did they for the Indiana Jones stuff? Were they smart enough at that point to keep everything? Or were they still throwing stuff out? Like,
I don't know that they were throwing stuff out so much as there was a lot of rental stock, because a lot of this stuff was period, not custom. Right?
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
You make stuff for Empire Strikes Back. You're not renting the Hoth soldier outfits.
True.
You're making those. So that stuff George ends up keeping. Why? He made it. The blasters from the first movie, those were all rentals. What happened? They got sent back to Bapti, and some of them, maybe George bought some back. Maybe some of them got into private hands. Maybe some were reused, taken apart, used in different movies, discovered years later, etc. With Indy, even, you know, in Temple of Doom, a lot of the stuff was rented.
That makes sense.
You know, and there was a lot of custom stuff done, though. For whatever reason, the prop maker, I think it was Barry Wilkerson, who David Oliver was really the guy that did this years and years ago from Prop Masters as his company for decades now, and he had gotten together with Miss Wilkerson and had gotten a lot of those props out into private hands years and years ago. So banquet beetles and monkey heads and thuggy swords and thuggy bows and the stunt rifles for the British soldiers at the end, the Enfield rifles. You know, some of those were functioning rifles shooting blanks, and some of them were just fiberglass castings. You know, I think a bunch of daggers and swords and all kinds of stuff. So, you know, a lot of this stuff, yeah, you know, whatever that prop guy's deal was at the end of it, he keeps the stuff.
Yeah, right.
You know, but they did a much better job of keeping things, even Sankara stones, a lot of those went out. But they definitely did a better job keeping Indiana Jones stuff than they did, let's say, the first Star Wars.
Right, that's what I was wondering.
Tom, is it true? I was always under the impression that it wasn't Star Wars that kickstarted the archive. It was technically when they were making Indiana Jones.
It was more Empire and Indy.
Empire and Indy, around that time.
And it's, you know, the idea of the archive for George was about reuse, not about, you know, future museums.
Being able to
make sense.
Like continuity, having if they made other movies,
resources,
and
it really was used that way all the way through the special editions and the prequels. Like, you know, there's stuff that was pulled out of the archives to be used in those movies, and, you know, not treated with any particular reverence or anything like that, because it was thought of as, well, George says this is his stuff because he's, you know, and now he's making this movie. He's paying for it himself. He'll just use his own stuff.
They weren't doing it like now, where they go in with like gloves and show you something.
Right? Yeah.
No, it wasn't like archival materials, but that is great. It's that, you know, having the resource, it's already made, like, you know, efficiency, continuity, things like that.
Thank goodness they did, right? Because all of the stuff that we're putting into people's hands that comes, out of this archive collection, that doesn't happen if in the 80s they weren't thinking, hey, we might need this. Let's keep it around.
That's right.
Yeah.
What's the size of the Indiana Jones section in the archives versus Star Wars? Like,
it has a very healthy costume section. You know, especially by the time you get to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Right.
There's it's a much smaller section than, say, the original trilogy or the prequels.
Right.
But it's decent, and there is a lot of key stuff there. But, you know, Indy, for all the artifacts and stuff, really there's more opportunity for wardrobe, I think, than anything, in terms of, you know, what they've got, and in terms of even what they could have. You know, knowing all the rental stuff from Temple of Doom takes a big chunk of stuff out of their hopper. Although they do have examples of a lot of those things. You know, Shankara stones, there's a bunch of those there. You know, there's definitely a bunch of thuggy elements and things like that, even though a ton of that's in private hands over the years.
Are they gonna borrow anything for the George Lucas Museum at all? Do you know, or are they?
That's something that they would have to reveal. Not something I could ever speak.
Yeah, no, sure. I was just wondering, because I know they are going to use some things. I just didn't know if it was going to be a lot or not. Yeah, that's interesting. I listen. I really think you guys again knocked it out of the park with this thing. I think collectors are going to be just excited to put something so different in their collection. And I know I keep saying that, but I just think it's, compared to what I think Indiana Jones people have currently, this is just so out there.
Oh yeah. The amount of messages I was getting when the teaser images went up, it was like, you know, it was just one of those things where people just like, is this real? Is this? And
they're not really doing this, are they?
And Tom, you've heard, I'm sure you've heard from some big Indiana Jones collectors. Are they really pumped about this? I mean, they have to be.
I've definitely got a few that have reached out extremely excited for it. I've seen a handful that have said, you know, there's a few that are, I think, struggling with getting it by a gatekeeper, maybe I'll say.
Oh, sure. Exactly what you were saying, Jason. Like, how do you...
But look, that makes it that much better, right? Like if you have to
sure.
sneak around a little, it makes it more exciting.
Yeah.
No, it is one of these things that I think this is a standout item.
Yeah.
Like you put this among all your other indie stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
And
okay, the Belloc staff headpiece is pretty cool, but this really jumps out.
Yeah, you have the right lighting on this, and it's displayed properly. It's definitely definitely like.
And I'll say this thing, the right lighting, by the way, is either a side light or a backlight. It pops. Again, we did, I think I gave you kind of a range of pictures here, but I definitely did a healthy dose of backlight when I was doing the photos on these. And there's a few shots where I really intentionally kind of I mean, there it's dark on purpose. There you go. A lot of backlight.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a more front lit, but still, a little drama in the lighting really helps this guy look like the film. And if you find that shot where we had the film comparison in there,
where's that? That's
that's
you look in the film, it's backlight from one side, side and backlight,
and this
from the
gives
other
you
side,
like all the mandible and the cheek sucked in, and you're seeing all that
just
great
accents,
detail.
all of that stuff.
Yeah,
it's a lot of detail in the face, man. It's crazy.
Thanks. Yeah, and if people at home go to this website, download the image and zoom in. There's plenty there to see as you go.
Yeah, there is. I mean,
part of the fun though is when you finally get the piece in hand and you get all those additional discoveries, and you're sitting with it and you're processing it. Like that's some of the best.
Well, listen, photography can't catch everything. Like you were saying, Tom, you can't catch some. It's hard to catch some of the browns mixed with black. It just is what it is.
He's got a lot of age spots and spatter and spotting on him that really doesn't show through in the pictures. It just looks like real skin, but like seeing it in person, you see all that spatter and spotting, which is on the original, and that's why we wanted to paint it that way.
That's cool.
Effantman's a good example of that too. I feel like the Effantman maquette, until you have it in front of you, you don't see all the paint that's going on that thing, because it really is, it kind of reads as like, oh, it's gray with a wash, but there's drips, there's browns, there's highlights. In the mouth, there's drips of thickened gloss to look like drool to match what Phil did on his. And that I've yet to see a photo that really captures that. And like we were trying. And then, of course, the cloak too. There's just so much going on that cloak.
No, it's a fantastic. We just did the spotlight for that one, and it's a really, really, really great piece.
Thank you.
The amount of
the Legacy sold out record time. It was like 2 minutes, kind of,
amazing.
The heart stopping when that happens.
That was intense. I was lucky enough to get the Legacy, and just learning the tricks like signing in, having everything ready to go. Everything
preload your browser with all your information.
You got to. Sometimes you even cart something.
PayPal Express checkout,
and there's all these tricks, but we're hoping if timing aligns that we can do sort of what we do with Yuzum, we can do the unboxing, and because I felt like we get a lot of info doing these conversations, but when we did that sort of in real time, it brought a lot of other things that were sort of coming to mind, during the process during making.
Well, Jason,
you're also what you get from a picture.
Yeah, and you're also able to, Jason, you're also able to look at it and actually see things that you can ask questions about.
Exactly. Yeah, you just
unpack the heft of it, look underneath things, that kind of stuff.
You're just unpacking a lot more that wouldn't normally come to mind.
If I'm not mistaken, I don't know. I don't think they started today. They're like on the absolute verge of shipping out the first waves of Effantmans for people who paid in full. If anybody's on a payment plan, then that's obviously, once the payment plan's done, then we start going through those. But for the paid in full orders, I mean, if they didn't start going out this week, then they'll probably start going out next week, because I know there's literally like a 6-foot banquet table full of these right now that I did the QC on today, and we just had to. A couple of little things I wanted them to tack glue down on the cloaks to make sure they stayed at the right amount of roll on the lip and stuff like that. But otherwise, like they're ready to go. I think it's more is Ross ready to go in terms of packing and shipping them, because he's busy as anything these days.
We were saying when we did the spotlight, we were talking, saying that like it's got to, I mean, you guys don't have all the room in the world. Like
No.
you guys also have to keep some of these that people haven't paid off yet. That just have to be stored.
We're trying to
you,
balance our production.
Sure.
Years going back, it would be like, oh, we're doing a run of 100 of this. Let's do all 100. Now it's like, okay, let's do as many as we think are going to get paid in full. And then we'll work on the others for 6 months while those people are paying off, or we put off working on them for 3 months so that they'll be done at the right amount of time. And then we can focus on the who's going to pay in full on the next batch.
That makes sense.
But we make sure we have all the materials ahead of time, that we have all the, all our paint set aside, all of that, so that when we get back into production, it is another wave. There is some momentum you lose there, and that does add a little bit of cost sometimes doing it that way. But there's a price to be paid for storage space, and especially when you're talking about big things. The Donovan bus, those F-Mons are not small. I could store a lot of those little Lightman aliens for the same size that I could do one F-Mon.
We were talking about the size of the F-Mon. I mean, that thing is it feels that one again feels like some of the bigger pieces you guys have done. Like it feels like that size of a.
I wonder if I think people sort of reacted that way to the Rancor maquette too. Sure. Even though it's not as big as F-Mon, it's
but like still almost it can almost be its own standalone piece.
Yeah, it can. Yeah, you could have just that Rancor.
Yes,
and it's still its own thing. Yeah, totally. The F-Mon it really does drift into that territory of like, is this a maquette? Because everybody else kind of drifts around the same size. But then, you get the Gamorrean, the Tony McVeigh Gamorrean from Mandalorian in there, the standing one, that's a similar height.
He's a decent
you get
size,
the Tauntaun, the gray Phil Tippett Tauntaun, that's a similar height. So if you can integrate him into your tall shelf with those guys,
but I think the mix,
do a little stepped display of a couple of shorter ones next to him.
Right.
Yeah, and the mixed media on him brings them together a little bit differently too, which allows it to be more of like that presence. But yeah, it's funny. I know we joked quite a while back about when you had all the styles hanging around the shop, and I always think with a piece like this, the guy who has to, I forgot something, I was going to run back to, oh Jesus, like when you walk in and the head sitting there,
especially Donovan. I mean, you walk up on Donovan at the wrong time. Holy shit.
Yeah.
No, but I think, listen, guys, I think that's going to be it for us. I just so everyone knows, if you want a F-Mon, there are still 8.
There's 15? As of right now, it looks like there are 16 left in the signature edition, and that's it. So, and there's only 83 of those. So, those are going to go.
That right there speaks volumes. That out of 83,
and that's that's one day. Right. So that's
crazy.
We build those editions where the goal is to have them around for a few weeks at the very least. So when you get something that's that close after just a day, it's kind of like, oh, okay.
Well, good. I mean,
Phil made a winner, man. That F-Mon.
Yeah, he did.
It's a really, really cool piece. And seeing a batch of them together, all that distressing on the cloak, like I just know the work that goes into it. So like, I just look at it and I'm like, that's hours and hours of time that people put into this. And, to me, that's art. That's what makes something special.
Yeah, you guys killed it. And if anybody's looking for or still wanting to grab that, pick it up soon, or else you're going to be paying.
Donovan is next Tuesday.
Donovan's next Tuesday.
So Tuesday on July 1st, which is technically Indiana Jones's birthday, apparently. And canonically anyway. But and it'll go up at noon Eastern. It's going to be $12.99 plus shipping. There is a 6-month payment plan for anybody that wants to use it. But with only 89 pieces, after seeing what's happened with some of the previous editions on Indy, it's kind of like I'm not trying to be the sales guy, but
you got 5,000 people going after 8. Yeah, it's. Yeah.
But that's great though for you, Tom. Now that you don't have to be the sales guy now, which is fantastic. Like you can sell these. These things are going to sell.
We can just focus on like making stuff that we absolutely love, and like the most recent the 2-pack of the maquettes that we did, Lightman and Bubblehead. These are unused concepts that we managed to sell through almost the whole edition in a matter of weeks at this point. And those I thought were going to be on there for years. I think there's like, I don't know, 7 or 8 of those left,
Crazy.
6 left, maybe.
Amazing.
I think it's 6.
I even remember I said to you, I think the next day, the day they went on sale, I said to Matt, I was like, I cannot believe how many people reached out to me and was smitten that they grabbed one of these. They were just like, I got one, I got one, I got one.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even one of those hype pieces that people were like clawing at each other for. And I was like, so many people just, you know, so
I just looked. It is. There's six sets of those left at only $3.99 each.
Amazing.
So it's just like it's instant variety to the collection, and that's the whole point of that collection is that variety. It's the concepts, it's the sketches, it's the things that didn't get done, and that, you know, to have a couple of these guys that really didn't get made is just like, well, and I just find so much fun in that.
And like we said, Jason, it's interesting because you can either be the guy that collects the whole line, right? Or you can be the guy like me that just goes, I really like this piece. Like I really like Yuzum. I'm gonna get that. And I really like maybe one over here.
Pull the trigger on characters.
You don't have to. There's something for everybody in that line, which is really cool. And I said it in the last one, and I mean it truly, that I really am happy you guys have something that's a line like this, that because we as collectors want Regal Robot to succeed and to go a lot further, because
me too.
Yeah, I know you do too. We all want it together because I think it's beneficial for the collecting community, for the Star Wars, Indiana Jones community. Like, you know, more of this stuff is great. And so it's just great that you continue to come up with things to come out with, and I love it. I'm excited.
Well, and it is a nice little niche of its own that literally no one else does, you know, like no other licensee is even touching this space.
Right.
And I think it's the sort of thing that I love that as an identity. I think it really speaks to the behind the scenes stuff. It speaks to the makers and the guys who and women who put it together for the film, and that we celebrate them and that we incorporate them, you know, that shining the spotlight on the unsung heroes.
I love that you pulled that. And that's another thing. We literally just said that the fact that people get to learn, like, you know, that they may not know, right? People who just are these sort of, you know, really passionate collectors, but they might not have known, you know, a lot about Ken Ralston or, you know, Ben Carson or, you know, and that's great that they're getting that little, you know, that piece of artwork, this signature. They're not losing out in any of that element, and they're getting to learn a little bit more behind it. So it's great that you're able to pull that in. You know, if people visit both the website, the Facebook page, you know, you guys drop little interviews and commentaries.
The Regal Robot YouTube, there's tons of those.
It's so well rounded. It's such a nice package. It's not just like, hey, here's this piece. If you like it, buy it. If you don't, like, you're getting so much more. And you're getting that behind the scenes peek as to the how, the why, the when, and the practicality of it. I think that's fantastic.
And the who, and you know, bringing them into it and hearing from them and getting, one of my favorite things is that the information for who sculpted each of these things. There's like 90 of them in the archives. The information who sculpted each of them was mostly out there, but it wasn't anywhere in a single place that anyone could figure it out. And so, you know, in the archives records, it just would say Maquette and the name of the character. And, you know, sometimes it was just a silly name that was made up by someone years ago. Sometimes it's an actual character because it was used in the movie. But we went through and basically were able to, in getting to know Ken and Judy and Jeannie and Kirk and Phil and John Berg and Ken Ralston and Dave Carson and Chris Wayless, all of these people that worked on these things, and others that just worked on the scene, Tony McVeigh, etc. We were able to go through all this and figure out who sculpted almost every single one of these. There's like 2 or 3 that haven't been, that no one wants to own up to sculpting. And I think one of them.
Okay, I was going to say that's the difference. Not that it has discovered. They're just like, oh, that wasn't my piece.
You know, I don't know who did that one. Yeah. But and we were able to give that information to the archive so that that's now with these items. That's now in the file, so that, you know, who sculpted this thing, who created it, is now part of the history of that piece. And for every one of these we do, we're telling that story. We're giving that information to people that maybe no one ever had. How many years did we look at behind the scenes photos or the Smithsonian magazine cover and saw the little light man guy with his arm out, the little Close Encounters
And
looking alien,
all the questions,
and go like, is that Star Wars? Was that maybe made for Cocoon? Like, who did that? Why is that there? I don't know what this is, and now we can go like, oh no, Dave Carson made it, and he did it like that because George said he wanted to do a version of Lightman that looked like a Close Encounters alien. And that's it. It's just like, there's the story. There's the history of this that we never even knew. And Dave didn't even really, it wasn't in the forefront of his mind. It was only as we dug through him and he saw it, he went, oh, wait, I know what that is. That to me is just magic. And like,
it's
so
really great
cool
for them
to be able
too,
to
right?
do.
Because who's thinking 20, 30, 40 years later that you're coming to them with this, and it's just got to bring back that feeling, and that, and then like you said, it triggers the things that they just completely forgot about. Oh, I remember this date. I remember why I did this. This is what George said. And
honestly, what I love about it is that Tom, you guys you're introducing collectors to the behind the scenes like people and collectibles and stuff. Like, that's honestly, like, look, Jason is your demographic, right? Like, Jason's your guy. Like, he's your guy. But there's a lot of people outside of that don't know about any of this stuff, and aren't coming into, they're coming in from, they were collecting Hot Toys or something, and now they're coming in
or Gentle Giant busts,
right? But it's cool that they get to be part of the education and part of this thing that I think it's just cool.
Thank you, man. No, pulling those people in and bringing them along for this journey has really been fun. And seeing people, man, it's like there's nothing like a convert. It's like they go in, like, once someone once it clicks, it's like, oh man, once they get it, and it becomes like, you can collect character busts, you can collect character figures, you can collect statues, all this other stuff. It's like, with this, you get history. With this, you get, that piece of the archives. You get that thing that helped create the character that you love. It's something that has a story and a background and a future that just getting some new interpretation of a character doesn't give you.
It brings things full circle, because you get to appreciate it differently. You look at the piece differently, you watch the movies differently. You really do. It changes the whole perception of you when you get these things and learn about all the aspects that come
Jason,
into
we've talked about this before too, is that there's not a lot of things that you can collect that have that are connected to the word lineage. Like, that is very few and far between, the things that people collect can say that. And Star Wars, Indiana Jones, maybe Star Trek, I don't know what else is there. Like, there's not a whole lot of stuff that you can actually collect
compared to what's out there. It's a very small
so it's a special thing, man. And you guys are at the forefront of that, I think, of just connecting those collectors to that. I love it. So anyway, we literally we can talk about this forever, guys. We need to probably stop. Yeah, we got to stop. So
but what we can do is say, and speaking of lineage, the Donovan bust is scanned off the original animatronic.
See, there we go. Yep.
Check it out. I'm thank you for helping showcase this for folks.
Absolutely.
I hope people enjoy it. I know that we're all really, really proud of it and excited to see how many people bring it home on Tuesday, and and how it's received once people start getting it and putting it in their collections and finding that perfect spot for it and all of that. So,
I'm excited. I hope we get to see. I mean, I don't know where we would see some. Maybe we'll see some images here and there, because I'm not part of the
Jason, are you noticing that Matt's got the perfect backlighting for Donovan right now with that hard backlight? I don't know. Maybe he needs one to just put right up at the mic for the next one.
Listen. Don't tell me.
You don't know what's funny when it comes to the indie stuff. So the year in which I was born, it's not to say that, like, I kind of missed the indie thing, right? Like, Star Wars was Return of the Jedi was my first movie of introduction to Star Wars, and where I was old enough to sort of understand and comprehend. And then other things spanning off G.I. Joe, He-Man, so I kind of missed it in indie train. So I didn't know like a lot about it. But my wife's a huge indie fan. I mean, she's seen them all. She loves them. The newest one, when it came out, she had to see it. So I knew a little bit about it, but not enough. Like, you talk to me about Star Wars, I can answer all kinds of, arbitrary sort of things that are just like, what, and then I started as you started coming out with pieces, you know, I wasn't really jumping on them right away because I'm like, yeah, I know what this piece is. Obviously, this is a stand-up piece, but then like the staff, I was like, wow, that thing's just so beautiful.
That's
It's an
beautiful.
amazing piece. But then, you know, you go back and you watch the movies a little bit, and I'm like, wow, I'm missing a lot here, right? Like there's so much to this. So then when you did the bust, it was one of those things where I'm like, since my wife was like, look at this piece, right? And it became one of those things where I'm like, I think this might be one of those pieces where like I kind of have to have it in the collection, which for me is so outside of the box and one of those things where it's like, you know, maybe not. And, you know, now, like, as we talked about earlier with the, you know, the urn and, you know, all these things that you're sort of kicking yourself over. But I like more of the unique pieces because I feel like the urn and the stones are more of those, you know, it's the blaster of Indiana Jones or the lightsaber of Indiana Jones.
Yeah, sure.
But this is that unique piece that you can, you know, people are going to recognize it immediately.
Yeah.
But it's unique enough where it's a standout piece that you can just enjoy.
Star Wars and Indiana Jones have that connection, right? They just feel connected.
But I mean, as far as like it's not like somebody made an RPF run of this 10 years ago.
No, yeah.
This is that piece. And it's like,
this is one of those, like anybody who sees it, who knows the movie is going to go, he chose poorly,
yeah,
you know,
exactly.
they're just gonna, it's just going to happen, you know,
until next year when we see the next sculpt will be the melted top, right, with the melted wax. Yeah, it'd be awesome.
Get Chris Wayless stat, you know. Comes with one of those jet heaters that they use, you know, on set.
It's one-time display.
You can only display it once. You know?
that'd be such a great gag piece. But
oh my god.
Okay.
All righty.
I think we're good, guys. I think we've covered it. And you know, look, it does come out next Tuesday, which is what's the date on that?
July 1st.
7/1. July 1st.
Yep. Amazing price. Easter. Tom, great job.
Thank you.
Great job, Regal Robot team. Really, really happy for you guys. So
kudos to, I'll throw a special shout out to Sam at the studio who did the finishing on the first, probably about 10 of them, paint and hair. She really, really killed it. Great stuff. And a few other folks, Dan and Jules worked on the castings and things like that. But yeah, it's been fun developing these and seeing them start to multiply. So it's going to be neat getting them home to people. I can't wait.
I love it. That's really cool. All right, guys. I think that's it. Thank you. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks so much.
See ya.